So in the previous movie, I showed you how to create this simple animation effect by distorting the falcon's wings using the puppet warp command. In this movie, we're going to focus on this text up here that starts as standard text inside of a normal talk bubble and then explodes. So we'll start off with this file that contains the 19 different bird wing variations. If you're working along with me, scroll up the Layers panel to the top of the list, and you'll find this group called Text Explosion that I've created in advance. And I've also got this editable text set in Myriad Bold Condensed inside of a talk bubble, which is one of the custom shapes that ships along with Photoshop. What we're going to do is create the intermediate layers that are needed for the text to explode, and we'll do so once again using Puppet Warp. What we're going to do here is set up some onion skins. I'm going to go ahead and zoom on in to 100% so we can take in this effect close and personal. And onion skinning is a traditional cell animation technique. You basically draw intermediate frames while you can see the keyframes in the background. And so I'm going to click on this balloon layer that's inside the text and shapes layer, and I'll press the 8 key in order to reduce the opacity to 80%. Then I'll click on the squawk layer, this text layer right there, to make it active, and I'll press Control-J or Command-J on the Mac in order to make a copy of it. Now let's take this copy and color it so that we can tell it apart from everything else. I've got my color panel up on screen, and I'm looking at the HSB sliders, which you can get by clicking on the flyout menu and choosing this command. And I'm going to change the saturation and brightness values both to 100%, so I have this bright red. And I'll press Alt Backspace or Option Delete on the Mac in order to fill this text with that red. Now I'll click on the layer below, which is still black, by the way. And before I can apply Puppet Warp to it, I have to convert it to a smart object. So with my rectangular marquee tool selected, I'll right-click inside the image window and choose Convert to Smart Object. Then I'll go up to the Edit menu and choose Puppet Warp. Now, at this point, I can lay down a pin, and notice if I click in the top of the A, or anywhere inside the A for that matter, and then drag, I'll move the A independently of the rest of that black text. So you're going to modify each letter by itself. Press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to put the A back where it was, and then I'll click down here at the bottom of the letter, and I'll shift-click on this pin in order to select it, and I'll drag these pins down like so. And then I'll shift-click on this one to deselect it, and I'll drag this guy over. And then I'll click on this pin, and I'll drag it upward. So you can see how I'm trying to split the difference between the original text and the exploded text in the background. Now I'll go ahead and click at the top of the W in each of 3 spots there, and then click at the bottom of the W as well, and I'll drag this guy down, and I'll drag this one down as well. So you can see how you can really customize your letter forms using this command. Now you're going to get wacky effects, and your effect, depending on where you set your pin down and where you move your pins, is going to look fairly different than mine, which is really the joy of Puppet Warp. All right, I'll go ahead and click at a couple of bottom locations on the K and up at the top of the K as well. Drag this guy upward, drag this one over to about here, drag this one down, and drag this one down to this location. Now you don't have to get too strung out over exactly how your letters work, because after all, this thing's going to last 1 frame. This effect is going to go by really fast. We're just trying to convey motion. Now, with rounded letter forms like the U, you need to click 3 times, like so, because otherwise you'll end up distorting the heck out of the character. Now, shift-click on these 2 points so all 3 are selected, and then drag them down in unison. And then drag this point at the top of the U up and drag this guy as well. Now, the Q is the most complicated of our letters because it has curvature at the top and at the bottom. So we need 3 points at the top, 3 at the bottom, and then a 4th point down here for the tail. And then go ahead and shift-click on these guys to select all the bottom points and drag them down to about there. And then grab all the top points, like so, and drag them up. So you can see that we're trying to follow the rounded interior of this talk balloon. Now click at 4 points on the S, should do the trick, and drag this point down, and then drag this guy up like so, and you want to drag this point along the shoulder of the S up as well. Then press the Enter key, or the Return key on the Mac in order to accept your change. Now we're going to create another variation on this text But we don't need this filter mask. So right-click on it here inside the Layers panel and choose Delete Filter Mask. And then press Control-J or Command-J on a Mac to make a copy of this layer. Click on the original layer down there and press the 5 key in order to reduce its opacity to 50%. So again, we're onion skinning here. We need to be able to tell all of the letter forms apart. Now click on this squawk layer that's sandwiched between the editable text layer and the smart object below. And then double-click on Puppet Warp in order to re-enter the mode, as well as revisit your last applied pins. And then drag them downward. Now, we probably want the text to explode a little more as it goes along. So in other words, it accelerates. So these guys want to be closer to the letters like so. But again, you can go your own way and experiment any way you like to. I'll go ahead and drag these guys up, and I'll drag this one down and this one down as well. And then the top of the A needs to come down and the bottom of the A needs to come up, and the other bottom of the A has to come up as well. And then drag the top of the U down to about there, I'd say, and drag this guy down as well. And then select all 3 points at the bottom of the U and drag them up. And then all 3 pins at the top of the Q and drag them down like so. And we want all 4 points at the bottom of the Q, so click and shift click on them, and then drag them up to about there. Finally, we want to work on the S. And so drag this guy up to about this location, drag this one down to somewhere around here, and then drag the shoulder down as well. Go ahead and press the Enter key or the Return key on a Mac in order to accept that change. And also just go ahead and reduce the opacity of this layer a little bit. I'll press the 7 key to take it down to 70%, and then I'll click on the live editable text layer, and I'll press the D key in order to restore my default colors, and I'll press Alt Backspace or Option Delete on the Mac in order to fill that with black. And you can now get a sense here. Maybe I should take the opacity of this layer down a little more. Let's say 50%. Which I can get by pressing the 5 key. And now you can see exactly how that explosion is going to occur. Before you stop working on this file, you do need to restore all the opacity values because we're going to need everything to be 100%. So with this layer selected, shift-click on the balloon layer. So these 3 layers are selected. And then go ahead and press the 0 key in order to take the opacity value up to 100%. In previous versions of Photoshop, you may need to change the opacity of each layer independently. Now I'll go ahead and zoom out, and we now have all the ingredients we need to animate this bird and create that animated movie that I showed you at the outset of this movie. And we shall be doing exactly that. We will create that frame-by-frame animation in Photoshop next week, or if you're listening to this in the future, in the next movie.